The rain pounded against the window of the moving truck as Brian gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. His mother's funeral was just yesterday, and now he was driving across state lines to a father he barely knew, leaving behind the only home that had ever felt safe. But when the call came from Dad, awkward, hesitant, offering a room in his suburban Ohio house, Brian had no choice. The apartment was gone, swallowed by debts and grief. Pulling into the driveway of the neat two-story home in Cleveland, Brian felt a knot twist in his stomach. He hadn't seen his father, Mark, in years, not since the divorce when Brian was 12. Mark had remarried once, but that ended badly, and now he had a girlfriend, Karen, who Brian knew little about except that she was traditional, whatever that meant. As he stepped out, lugging his suitcase, the front door swung open. Mark stood there, broad-shouldered and graying, his face etched with uncomfortable sympathy. "Son," he said, pulling Brian into a stiff hug. "I'm sorry about your mom. Come on in." Karen appeared behind him, a woman in her late 40s with sharp eyes and a forced smile. She extended a hand, cool and brief. "Welcome, Brian. We've prepared the guest room for you." Dinner that night was tense, the clink of forks echoing in the silence. Brian picked at his lasagna, his mind drifting to Ben, the guy he'd been seeing back in Chicago. Ben's texts had been his lifeline these past weeks, warm, reassuring messages that made Brian feel seen. But here, in this house, he wondered if he'd have to hide that part of himself again. As the evening wore on, Karen cleared the table with efficient movements. "So, Brian," she said, her voice casual but probing, "what's your story? Any girlfriend back home?" Brian's fork paused mid-air. He glanced at Mark, who avoided his eyes. "No," Brian replied carefully. "I'm single." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. Ben and he had only been dating a few months, but it felt real. Stolen kisses in coffee shops, late-night talks about dreams. Yet something in Karen's gaze made him swallow the rest. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, Brian scrolled through photos of Ben on his phone. Ben's smile, easy and genuine, contrasted with the stiffness of this new life. "Why did I come here?" he thought. Mom would have understood. She always did. But Dad? Brian's mind raced. He'd come out to his mother at 16, and she'd hugged him, said it changed nothing. Mark, on the other hand, had been distant even before the divorce. What if he reacted badly? The fear gnawed at him, a familiar ache. He texted Ben, "Miss you already. This place feels like a cage." Ben's reply came quick. "Hang in there. Call me tomorrow." The next morning, Brian woke to the smell of coffee. Downstairs, Mark was reading the paper, Karen bustling in the kitchen. "Morning," Brian mumbled, pouring a cup. Karen turned, her expression pleasant but guarded. "Brian, we should talk house rules. Mark and I value a certain harmony here." She glanced at Mark, who nodded vaguely. "No late nights, no parties, and respect for our values." Brian nodded, but inside questions swirled. What values? He spent the day unpacking, his thoughts tangled in worry. By evening, when Ben called, Brian stepped outside to talk, his voice low. "It's weird here," he whispered, "like I'm walking on eggshells." As days blurred into a week, Brian found a part-time job at a local bookstore, a refuge where he could lose himself in stories. There, he met locals who reminded him of Chicago's vibrancy, but the house remained a pressure cooker. Karen's comments started subtle, remarks about family values on the news, eye rolls at pride parades mentioned in passing. Brian bit his tongue, but the strain built. One night, after a long shift, he came home to find Karen waiting in the living room. "Brian," she said, her tone firm, "I saw your phone light up earlier. A message from someone named Ben. Heart emojis. Care to explain?" Brian's heart slammed against his ribs. He'd left his phone charging in the kitchen. Stupid mistake. "It's a friend," he stammered. Karen's eyes narrowed. "A friend? Look, I'm not blind. Mark and I have discussed this. This house is our sanctuary, and we don't condone that lifestyle." Mark entered then, looking weary. Karen, let's not. But she cut him off. No, Mark. He needs to know, no gays under my roof. If that's who you are, Brian, you'll have to find somewhere else. The words hung in the air like smoke. Brian stared at his father, waiting for defense, but Mark just sighed. Son, Karen's got strong opinions. Maybe we can talk about this. Brian's chest tightened. Strong opinions? This was his home now, or was it? That night, alone in his room, tears stung his eyes. Why won't Dad stand up for me? Am I that disposable? The rejection echoed his deepest fears, the ones he'd buried since coming out. Ben's voice on the phone later was a bomb. Come back to Chicago. You don't have to stay there. But Brian whispered, I have to try. He's my dad. The conflict simmered, unspoken but palpable. Brian avoided the house, spending more time at work or wandering parks. His mind a storm of doubt. Was staying worth the erasure? Or was leaving abandoning the only family left? Brian's days blurred into a routine of evasion, each interaction with Karen laced with unspoken tension. He'd nod politely at breakfast, murmur agreements to her pointed comments about traditional families. But inside, rage simmered. Why does she get to dictate my life? He thought, fists clenched under the table. Mark noticed, pulling him aside one afternoon in the garage. Son, give it time. Karen's from a different generation. She's not a bad person. Brian's jaw tightened. Dad, she's basically saying I'm not welcome because I'm gay. And you just let her. Mark shifted uncomfortably, tools clattering in his hands. It's complicated. After your mom, I was alone for years. Karen saved me from that. I don't want to lose her. The word stung like a slap. So I'm the expendable one? Brian's mind screamed. He stormed out, driving aimlessly until he parked by a lake, staring at the water. Memories flooded. Mom's acceptance, her fierce protection. You're perfect as you are, she'd said. Now, without her, he felt unmoored, adrift in a sea of conditional love. Ben's calls became his anchor. Tell me about your day, Ben would say, his voice warm over the line. Brian poured out the frustrations. The way Karen changed the channel when a gay couple appeared on TV. Her prayers for lost souls. Ben listened, then shared his own stories. Coming out to unsupportive friends, the isolation. But you found me, Ben teased lightly, and I'm not letting go. Their conversations deepened, turning from flirtation to something profound. Brian imagined a future with Ben, simple, honest, but it clashed with his reality. One evening, after a grueling shift, Brian returned to raised voices. Karen and Mark were arguing in the kitchen. He's your son, Mark, but if he brings that influence here, I can't stay. Mark's reply was muffled. He's not hurting anyone. Brian froze in the hallway, heart pounding. Influence? Like I'm a disease? The thought twisted like a knife. He retreated to his room, dialing Ben. I can't do this, he choked out. She wants me gone. Ben's response was steady. Then come to me. I've got space in my apartment. But leaving felt like failure. That night, sleep evaded him, his mind replaying childhood scenes. Mark missing soccer games, the divorce fights. Had Dad ever really cared? The doubt festered, mixing with guilt. Maybe if I hide it better. No, that was the old Brian, the one who'd pretended in high school. He was 24 now, done with closets. The next morning, over coffee, he confronted them. Karen, what exactly is your problem with me? She set her mug down hard. It's not you, it's the choice. God doesn't approve. Brian laughed bitterly. Choice? It's who I am. Mark intervened. Enough, Brian. Respect her beliefs. Respect. The word echoed hollowly. Brian's eyes met his father's, pleading for alliance, but Mark looked away. Betrayal burned hot. He spent the day at the bookstore, shelving books with mechanical precision, his thoughts a whirlwind. What if I forced the issue? Bring Ben here? The idea terrified and thrilled him. Ben, with his easy laugh and kind eyes, represented everything Karen feared. Open love. As weeks passed, The house divided subtly. Meals eaten in silence, Brian's belongings confined to his room like quarantine. Karen's friends visited, their conversations drifting to moral decay in society. Glances cast his way. Brian endured, but cracks formed. One night, scrolling social media, he saw a post about chosen family. People building lives beyond blood. It resonated. Am I clinging to a father who won't fight for me? The question haunted him. Then came the breaking point. Brian had invited Ben for a weekend visit, framing it as an old friend. Ben arrived Friday evening, charming and unassuming. Dinner started civilly, but Karen's questions sharpened. So, Ben, what do you do? Ben smiled. Graphic designer. And you? Small talk frayed when Ben mentioned a Pride event he'd attended. Karen's fork clattered. Pride? That's just promoting sin. Ben glanced at Brian, who nodded subtly, his signal to hold back. But inside, Brian seethed. Why am I protecting her feelings? After dinner, alone with Ben in the guest room, doors open per house rules, Brian whispered apologies. This is hell. Ben pulled him close, a brief hug. You're worth it. But Karen overheard footsteps, bursting in. What's going on here? Her face twisted. Mark, I told you. No gays under my roof. Mark appeared, exasperated. Karen, calm down. They're just talking. But she shook her head. Either he goes or I do. Brian's world tilted. In that moment, staring at his father, he waited for the choice. Mark hesitated, eyes darting. Brian, maybe Ben should leave. The words shattered something inside. Betrayed again. Ben packed quietly, kissing Brian's forehead at the door. Call me when you're ready. Driving Ben to the bus station, Brian's tears blurred the road. Why does love have to cost so much? Back home, the silence was deafening. Karen retired early, victorious. Mark approached Brian in the living room. Son, Brian cut him off. Save it. You chose her. The accusation hung, unspoken regrets thickening the air. That night, Brian lay awake, grief morphing into resolve. I deserve better. But doubt lingered. Was pushing away the only way? The ultimatum echoed in Brian's mind like a relentless drum, each beat amplifying his isolation. Mark's choice, prioritizing Karen's comfort over his son's identity, carved a deeper wound than any words could. Why am I still here? Brian questioned himself, staring at the ceiling in the dim light of his room. The house, once a reluctant refuge, now felt like a prison of unspoken judgments. He avoided meals, grabbing food on the go, his interactions with Mark reduced to curt nods. Karen's presence loomed, her satisfaction palpable in every smug glance. Ben's messages poured in. I miss you. When are you coming back? Brian's replies were evasive, torn between loyalty to a fractured family and the pull of genuine love. Inner turmoil raged, guilt for resenting his father, anger at Karen's bigotry, fear of being truly alone. Mom would tell me to fight, he thought, clutching her old necklace. But fighting meant confrontation, and Brian dreaded the fallout. At work, the bookstore owner, Mrs. Hale, noticed his distraction. Everything okay, kid? She asked one slow afternoon. Brian hesitated, then spilled fragments. The move, the tension. Sounds like a tough spot, she said sympathetically. Family isn't always blood. Her words lingered, seeding doubt. That evening, Brian overheard Karen on the phone. Yes, Mark's son is different. Pray for us. The eavesdropped prayer fueled his fury. Different, like a flaw to fix? He confronted Mark in the study. Dad, do you agree with her? That I'm some sin. Mark rubbed his temples. Brian, I love you, but Karen's faith is important to her. Can't you just tone it down? Tone it down. The phrase ignited a firestorm in Brian's chest. You mean hide? Pretend I'm straight for her sake. Mark sighed. Life's about compromise. Compromise? Brian stormed out, driving to a nearby bar, a neutral space where he could breathe. There, nursing a soda, he called Ben. I feel like I'm losing myself, he admitted, voice cracking. Ben's response was fierce. Then don't. You're not the problem, they are. The call ended with Ben's invitation. Come visit me this weekend. Clear your head. Brian agreed, packing a bag secretly. But guilt gnawed. Am I abandoning Dad like he abandoned Mom? The trip to Chicago was a revelation. Ben's apartment, cluttered with art supplies, felt like home. They spent hours talking, Ben's hand in his quiet defiance. I want this for us, Ben said softly. No hiding. Brian's heart swelled, but shadows crept in. What about Dad? Back in Cleveland Sunday night, Karen greeted him with suspicion. Where were you? Brian met her eyes. With a friend. Her lips thinned. That Ben again? Mark, we need to talk. The argument erupted later, voices carrying through walls. He's influencing our home, Karen insisted. Mark's defense was weak. He's my son. But she pressed, choose, Mark, your values or chaos. Brian intervened, bursting in. Values? You mean hate disguised as religion? Karen recoiled. How dare you? Mark stood between them. Brian, apologize. Apologize? The demand broke him. No, I'm done pretending. He revealed everything. His sexuality, his love for Ben. Silence fell, heavy and accusatory. Mark's face paled. I didn't know it was serious. Karen crossed her arms. Well, now you do. And it's not welcome here. Brian looked to his father, desperation raw. Dad, please. Mark hesitated eternally. Then, Karen's right. This house can't handle that. The rejection crushed Brian, tears streaming. Worthless. Unwanted. He packed that night, belongings shoved into boxes, his mind a vortex of pain. Ben's voice on the phone urged, get out now. But as he loaded the car, Mark appeared in the driveway, eyes red. Son, wait. Brian paused, hope flickering. I don't want you to go. Karen watched from the window, arms folded. Then tell her to accept me, Brian challenged. Mark faltered. It's not that simple. Simple? Brian's laugh was hollow. It is. You just won't. Driving away, rearview mirror showing Mark shrinking, Brian's sobs racked him. Did I push too hard? Or not enough? In Chicago, Ben's arms enveloped him, a safe harbor. But the wound festered, family lost, identity affirmed at a cost. Friends rallied, offering support, but nights brought dreams of reconciliation. Was it worth it? The question tormented, blending relief with regret. Society's whispers echoed, honor thy parents, but at what price to self? As months passed, Brian built a life with Ben. Shared dinners, future plans. Yet calls from Mark went unanswered, the divide widening. One day, a letter arrived. I miss you. Let's talk. Brian stared at it, heart conflicted. Forgive or protect? The choice loomed, heavier than before. Forgiveness dangled like a fragile thread. Mark's letter a beacon in Brian's storm-tossed mind. He read it repeatedly, words blurring through unshed tears. I was wrong. Karen and I are struggling, but you're my son. Struggling? Brian thought bitterly. Because of me? The guilt resurfaced, insidious and familiar. Ben noticed, wrapping arms around him. You don't owe him anything, Ben murmured. But Brian's inner voice countered, he's trying. Isn't that enough? Days turned to weeks, the letter unanswered on the nightstand. Brian's new job in graphic design, thanks to Ben's connections, provided distraction, but thoughts intruded. What if I go back? Mend the bridge? Or stay? Nurture this love? The duality tore at him, sleep fractured by what-ifs. Society's expectations weighed heavy. Family first, blood unbreakable. But Karen's words replayed, no gaze, a reminder of the cost. Finally, Brian called. Mark's voice trembled. Brian? Thank God. They talked haltingly about Mom, the past. I should have protected you, Mark admitted. Karen's views. I let them blind me. Brian's throat tightened. Why now? Mark paused. She left. Said I was too soft. Left? Shock mingled with vindication. So only after she's gone? The accusation slipped out. Mark sighed. I was scared. Alone again. Alone. The word echoed Brian's own fears. They agreed to meet halfway, a diner in Indiana. Driving there, Brian's mind raced. What if it's a trap? Ben had cautioned. Guard your heart. But hope persisted. At the diner, Mark looked older, lines deeper. They hugged awkwardly. You look good, Mark said. Brian nodded. Ben's been great. Mark winced slightly. Ben. Your boyfriend. Brian braced. Yes. Mark nodded slowly. Tell me about him. Conversation flowed tentatively. Ben's art, Brian's job. But undercurrents surged. Karen thought it was a phase, Mark confessed. I didn't correct her. Brian's anger flared. A phase? It's my life. Mark raised hands. I know now. I'm sorry. Sorry. The word felt inadequate yet sincere. Tears welled. Do you accept me? Really? Mark met his eyes. Yes. It took losing you to see. Driving back, elation mixed with skepticism. Was this real or desperation? Ben listened that night, supportive but wary. People change, but watch for patterns. Brian nodded, but optimism bloomed. Phone calls increased, Mark sharing stories, asking about Ben. Inclusion felt novel, warming the chill of betrayal. Then came the invitation. Visit for the weekend. Just us. Brian hesitated. The house held ghosts, but closure beckoned. Okay. He agreed. Ben tagging along for support. Arriving, the place felt different. Karen's touches gone. Mark greeted them warmly, shaking Ben's hand. Nice to meet you. Dinner was laughter-filled. Stories exchanged. But as night fell, doubts crept. Is this too easy? The next day, a neighbor dropped by. Mrs. Ellis, chatty and conservative. Heard Karen left. Shame. Mark shifted. Yeah. Mrs. Ellis eyed Brian and Ben. And these are? Mark paused. Then, my son and his partner. Partner. The word hung proud. Mrs. Ellis's smile faltered. Oh, well, times change. After she left, Brian confronted. You didn't hesitate. Mark shrugged. I'm learning. But tension peaked that evening. Mark confessed. Karen wants to reconcile. Says she'll try. Try? Brian's stomach dropped. With me being gay? Mark nodded uncertainly. She promised. Ben interjected. Promises mean nothing without action. Brian agreed, fury rising. Don't bring her back, Dad. Not if it means hiding again. Mark looked torn. I love her. Love. The word twisted. More than me. The argument escalated, voices rising. I chose you last time. Mark shouted. Last time? Brian recoiled. You chose her. I left. Mark's face crumpled. I let you go to keep peace. Stupid. Regret poured out. Years of silence. Fear of judgment. Brian listened, empathy clashing with hurt. I needed you then. Mark nodded. I failed. Ben mediated, suggesting space. That night, Brian and Ben talked in whispers. He's trying, Ben admitted. But you deserve consistency. Brian's mind whirled. Forgive fully? Or set boundaries? Morning brought resolution. Dad. If Karen returns, she accepts us, or I walk. Mark agreed, hugging him tightly. Deal. Leaving, relief washed over Brian. But shadows lingered. Society debated. Can bigots change? Or is tolerance enough? Back in Chicago, life resumed, strengthened by tentative bonds. Yet calls from Mark grew infrequent. Hints of Karen's return surfacing. Doubt resurfaced. Was it all temporary? One day, Mark called. She's back, but on our terms. Our terms? Brian braced for the test. The test arrived unannounced. A powder keg disguised as a family dinner. Mark had insisted. Karen wants to make amends. Give her a chance. Brian agreed reluctantly, Ben by his side, their hands clasped in the car. Why risk this? Brian pondered, nerves frayed. For Dad? Or to prove I've healed? The house loomed familiar yet foreign. Mark's welcome hugged tight with anxiety. Karen appeared, her smile strained. Brian, Ben. Thank you for coming. Seated around the table, small talk tiptoed over landmines. How's work? Karen asked politely. Brian responded warily, Ben adding charm. But the facade cracked when conversation turned to news. A bill on gay rights. Karen hesitated. Then, I suppose equality is fair. Suppose? Brian's fork paused. You mean you support it now? She met his gaze. I'm trying to understand. Trying. The word felt like a concession, but insufficient. Inside, Brian battled. Accept the olive branch? Or demand more? Mark steered topics safely, but tension simmered. After dessert, Karen cleared her throat. Brian, I owe you an apology. My words were hurtful. Hurtful? Understatement seared him. They were bigoted, he corrected. She nodded. Yes, I was raised differently, but that's no excuse. Ben squeezed Brian's knee under the table, a silent anchor. The evening unraveled when Karen added, I pray you'll find peace. Peace? Brian's anger ignited. Peace from what? Being gay. Mark intervened. Karen. But she pressed. From conflict. Society makes it hard. Society? Brian stood. You made it hard. Your no gays rule. Tears glistened in her eyes. I was wrong. Fear drove me. Fear. The admission humanized her, clashing with Brian's resentment. Ben pulled him aside. She's reaching, but you decide. Brian's mind stormed. Forgive for Dad's sake, or protect my peace? Returning, he confronted. Actions matter. Accept Ben and me fully. Karen nodded. I will. Mark beamed, but skepticism lingered. Driving home, silence enveloped them. Think she'll change? Ben asked. Brian shrugged. Maybe, but I'm done begging. Weeks later, progress showed. Karen's texts. Saw a documentary on LGBTQ history. Eye-opening. Brian replied cautiously, walls cracking. But society intruded. Friends questioned his reconciliation. Why forgive intolerance? The debate raged internally. Is redemption possible? Or naive? Then crisis struck. Mark fell ill, heart scare, hospital-bound. Brian rushed back, Ben following. At the bedside, Karen was there, holding Mark's hand. Thank you for coming, she whispered. In the waiting room, they talked raw, unguarded. I love him, Karen said. And he loves you. Brian nodded. Me too. Vulnerability bridged gaps. I judged you harshly, she admitted. Afraid of change. Brian shared his pain. Isolation, rejection. Tears flowed, understanding dawning. Mark recovered, the ordeal cementing shifts. Family gatherings evolved, Ben included conversations deeper. Karen stumbled occasionally. An outdated term, a hesitant question, but corrected herself. Brian's heart softened. Not fully, but enough. Love's complexity unfolded. Conditional becoming unconditional. Yet doubts persisted. Society's divides mirrored his progress versus backlash. Pride Month arrived, Brian inviting them to a parade. Mark agreed. Karen hesitated, then joined. Watching floats, her face shifted from unease to tentative smiles. This is vibrant, she said. Brian laughed. It is. Ben's hand in his felt triumphant. But reflection haunted. Was change genuine or performative? Holidays tested Thanksgiving altogether. Laughter filled the house, but undercurrents remained. Karen's prayer included, for all families. Inclusive, Brian wondered. In quiet moments, Brian pondered his journey. Loss birthing growth, betrayal forging strength. With Ben, life bloomed, engagement whispers, future dreams. Mark's pride shone. I'm proud of you, son. Karen's evolution, slow but steady, challenged Brian's cynicism. Yet the core question lingered, sparking inner debate. Can love conquer prejudice? Or does it demand excision? Society argued both sides. Stories of reconciliation, tales of rupture. Brian chose hope, but vigilance. As years hinted at permanence, Brian looked back. Mom's death a catalyst, forcing confrontations. Pain sculpted resilience, choices defining bonds. But one query remained, inviting scrutiny. Is it right to forgive family bigotry if it means compromising your identity?